Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Keep Indiana Learning. I am so happy that you are with us today as we discuss Chapter 3 in our book study series, Keep Indiana Reading Digital for Good Edition. My name is Melissa Wally, and I'm an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning and an ed tech specialist with Hanover Community Schools in Cedar Lake, Indiana. Diana and I are here to read and discuss Digital for Good by Richard Collada, and we are very happy that you are reading along with us. And remember that you can find each chapter on the Keep Indiana Learning YouTube channel. With that, I'd like to say hello to Diana.
Hello, thank you, Melissa. I am so excited to be here as well. My name is Diana Knox. I am a technology instructional specialist at Clay Community Schools in Brazil, Indiana. And I'm also an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning. And I'm super excited today that we have two of our fellow innovation coaches joining us for the discussion. Two of my very favorite people we have, Nicole Nelson and Amy Stevens. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I am happy to be here as well with all of these wonderful ladies. I'm Nicole Nelson. I'm the Integrated Learning Coordinator for Lewis Cass Schools in Walton, Indiana.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be part of this conversation. Thank you so much for including me. My name is Amy Stevens, and I am a K-5 STEM teacher / technology integration specialist in the South Henry School Corporation, which is East Central Indiana. I'm also an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning and super excited to talk about Digital for Good.
So let's get right into it. In chapter 2, we talked about the 5 attributes that we can use to guide conversation with our students and children about positive online habits. And the book starts with balance, teaching students not to avoid tech, but to use it in healthy, intentional ways. And Mr. Collada shares about how being digitally balanced doesn't mean going screen free, but knowing when and how to engage. And for me, that was like a different way of thinking about it because we spend so many times and do lessons about like, okay, it's going to be a screen-free week, or how else can we engage with others in a screen-free way, and what can we play that doesn't involve a screen. So really starting with young children talking about balance instead was an interesting way to go about it. The chapter urges educators to really move beyond screen time limits, and parents too, and instead help students develop that self awareness from the beginning and having those thoughtful digital habits.
I really like that. Even just today, I led a professional development session and we were talking about blended learning, which is that intentional use of technology in learning environments. But it's so much more than that because it goes beyond that scope into just our everyday lives because the digital is just a piece of it. And if I think, reading about screen time, it was really eye opening because it's such a common phrase when we talk about children or teens and technology. And the idea that we have this one size fits all solution is kind of mind boggling because we are really moving away from that in so many other facets of our lives. And when we think about that could use some updating. So when you read what is said about the research, that gives you a lot to think about. And I wonder, after reading this, how much students actually learn about self-monitoring their digital usage if limits are always being set for them. Because then they're not responsible for it. It's somebody else's problem. So when are they learning that limits are important and how to identify those? And that's really a key part of this chapter.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that stuck out to me as well was the different types of technology use, but then the language that we're using in those. There's a big difference between passive technology use and active technology use. And if we're using that research about passive technology use to make decisions, and now that needs to be revisited. The technology consumption, when we're thinking about technology and technology use, consumption is more important than how we're using it is very different than how we might be using it if we were asking students to be creative and to be kind of critical thinkers and collaborative in that online space. I'm thinking about a session that I went to a while back where we looked at they compared technology use to the food pyramid, and how we have the junk food on our food pyramid that we need to kind of stay away from, and then there's that kind of passive, low learning value activities that we need to stay away from. But there are also really good, fruits and vegetables that we need to eat. Similarly, the high active and high learning value is where we need to be spending our time if we're going to be spending our time online. So that has always stuck with me, and I kind of reference that when I'm speaking to teachers now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. And that's, really truly the exciting part about this book is that Mr. Culata breaks down all of this down like into these manageable pieces for not only educators, but for parents. And I love, there's, a few moments in my world where I feel like I can be like, okay, let's connect mom and dad. I'm going to be my educator self, not my mom self. And let's have a good conversation. And I love this finding balance, just way of thinking. Instead of limits, we're teaching, just that concept of, when is a good time for, and schedule, or be thinking, or be mindful about. And so, kids are already learning about balance. They're already learning about moderation in different areas of their lives, even in the normal school day. Like right now, we've got from this time to this time to study a specific subject. And then from this time to this time, we're going to go outside for recess. And from this time to this time, we've got, just a small amount of time to, maybe take a break for a restroom or a movement break. But, one of the things that I do in my classroom, being a specials teacher, they do bring their learning device to me because, in a STEM room, we are, constantly creating and so forth. But there's a time and place for the device. And so one of my routines when they come in is they circle up on the floor. We sit down in a community circle, and we have iPads. So it's, screen down, Apple up. And then there's that hands clap in our lap. And that's just kind of teaching that way of there's a time and a place for it. I'm not on my device, while I'm teaching you. So please, you're not putting your screen up while you're listening to the learning. And so, even at home, right? Like you, with that balance part of, okay, have you gotten your homework done? Or did you go to your practice for whatever it is you might be practicing for? And then you've got this time now to either create or consume on technology. Even at dinner time, right? Like before you can have your dessert, you can have your dinner. Unless, we do like those reverse meals. Oh, I'm just being silly. But, when you parent, you start this off with children when they're like this big, right? When they're toddlers, and you keep reinforcing it. And so it's really good conversation for us to be able to have as we balance our digital usage and as we teach it as well and model it, right? As adults, we need to be talking about this.
Yeah, and I love that idea of always talking about it, because then it's not new information. It's something that we've always been talking about. It's just that open dialogue. And as adults, whether we're parents or educators or both, we have to be aware of what's out there in the technology land, as our children are experiencing a wide range of these different activities, and we're encouraging that. We want them to try new things, but we should be aware, but as we're encouraging them, we can't obviously just release them into try whatever you want, but we all, at that same time, we have to recognize not everything is the same. Everything doesn't have equal value. And talk to our kids about that. If something doesn't challenge them or benefit them, we should talk to them about that so that they understand and can learn to make good choices for themselves. That certainly isn't going to come easy. It's not going to be something that they're going to get when they're very young. But, as they learn and grow, I think that that is something that will come to them.
And we're going to make mistakes along the way as we do this. I mean, there's no answer book. There's no right or wrong. Everything is so different. And that's, part of the balance is that we as adults, we have to think and know that our digital usage changes. There's a lot of factors that can affect how much time a child can or even should be on a digital device. And I love that idea of speaking honestly and having those conversations, just to reiterate that, because too often it's because I said so. This is the rule. And by having an open dialogue, it really creates that back and that forth where there may be times that I don't understand exactly what my child is doing online, but maybe it is actually something that is beneficial. They're learning to create something, and that's going to take a little bit of time. And so I think when we speak honestly about that guidelines, it allows for that conversation to happen. And then it's not going to be so secretive, like I'm trying to sneak access to something. And then when those guidelines are in place, then how much balanced tech use is appropriate. It really helps our children start to make those decisions for themselves and make them more independent.
Yeah. There was a couple pages in this chapter where he talks about the language that we use with children, and says, you might have phrased it this way, when your children were younger, like when my kids were first, using their devices, feel like the first generation almost that was like, how young is too young, and when should I give them their device? And then, or can they have a TV in their room? Can they have a gaming system? And so some of those, like you were saying, Diana, just because I said so, starts to come out, or, you're addicted to your phone, or, you need to interact with real people. And so Mr. Collada kind of gives us some ways to think about, instead of some of those harsher, just kind of flat statements that we might say to students, to our kids, some ways to reframe that. And so one of the examples that he says is, instead of saying, you need to interact with real people, think about what they're doing online. How are they may be connecting with people. They may be connecting with their friends digitally. So instead we might say, your family also wants a chance to spend some time with you. Why don't you come out and, let's play a game, or, go for a bike ride. So thinking about kind of reframing our mindset and how we're speaking, and kind of setting those boundaries for our students and our children, our own children.
Sometimes we just need a break, right? And it's not a punishment to take a break, or to say, like, you know what, you haven't done anything wrong. Let's take a break. Let's be outside. It's just like in a classroom. Ladies and gentlemen, you've not done anything wrong, but we have come to a point in our learning where I think it's time we have a wiggle break, and it's like just teaching them that when those breaks happen, then that self-reflection of, like, how did you feel going into it? And then how did you feel coming out of it? And is that something that maybe you could apply when it comes to the device, right? I know that, like, a lot of times one of the first go-tos is if a child is in trouble, or if they are doing something that's totally unrelated to the phone. It's like, you're grounded from your phone. And so it's like this whole idea of the punishment fitting the crime, and so forth. And then also teaching, maybe if the child isn't on their device all the time, and maybe if there isn't a punishment that's needed, then it could make a little bit more sense to the child about why it's an on time or why it's an off time for screens. I know, you know, when screens were becoming more and more prevalent, we were starting to see some, like some public service announcements. And one of my favorite ones that I show children as we're learning the concept behind what a public service announcement is the Sesame Street device-free dinner one. It's one of my favorites because kids understand it. They giggle a little bit, but they're like, oh, yeah, that kind of does make sense. And so I just love, any way we can get children a part of learning more, practicing that. I've seen a couple ways of doing this is like, well, just give them a device and they'll just kind of naturally get tired of it. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a yes or no answer to that, but I do feel like as we've been talking today, that as grownups, we do owe it to our children to teach them how to take a break, how to remain balanced. There's a time for this, there's a time for that.
Absolutely. This chapter is just chock full of all sorts of nuggets that are really beneficial in thinking about it. So if you haven't read yet, really, I like the idea, and I want you to think about when you do read, the idea of having device use agreements for home. I really liked the clarification that nothing in this is meant to be a gotcha. It's really just outlining and discussing that it's a teaching tool to help them begin to think about boundaries so that when they are independent, maybe moving out on their own, going to college somewhere, they know how to balance things in a healthy way so that they can be mentally healthy, their academics can stay strong. And that theme of using this as a teaching tool is just prevalent throughout the chapter. And when we think about involving your children in those decisions and guidelines that affect their technology usage, then I think you just are headed for a better success in finding that balance.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it really is refreshing. It was refreshing to read this chapter. You hear so often what not to do with technology, what's wrong. And I think that this mindset or viewpoint really empowers parents and educators so that they can then empower children in the virtual space and set them up so that they are ready to be more successful and, like you said, Diana, more independent. And that's really what we want, not just with technology but with everything. So it's here, and we just need to embrace it like we do everything else. But with that brings us to our challenge. So for this chapter, we are challenging you to work on your own digital balance. And this is something that I actually like to do. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Silence your phone when you're with friends and family. That's something that I find myself doing. I never do it ahead of time. It's always once I hear one that I'm like, okay, I got to go in and do that. And then another one that I really have never thought about, but disable autoplay so that you're not automatically getting the next video. That's another way to work on digital balance. That will help you spend less time on those passive apps. And then you can take it a step further by either talking about it with someone else or passing on the challenge and challenging them to do the same.
I love that. And I know for myself mentally, that finding that digital balance and taking a break has been something I've done when I'm able that is very healthy for me. I'm in a phase of my life right now where I'm scared to get too far away from my phone just because I have some family with some health challenges. But when that passes, then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to put that aside. So I love that idea. That actually brings us to the end of our summary for chapter 3. We are so very glad that you joined us and that you're reading along. Special thanks to Amy and to Nicole for joining us today. And we hope that you'll keep Indiana reading and join us when we're back next time with chapter 4 of Digital for Good.